that should have worked. But that happens.
So then you just decided enough is enough, and you.
Enough was enough at that point.
Enough was too much at that point.
Richie was getting so. Richie was getting so. What's the word? Frustrated. And upset because he wasn't having the success that Neil and Steven was having, and it was starting to affect my relationship with him and the way he was behaving. That I didn't want to have a situation blow up whereby one of us would get upset and do something stupid. And I just thought, well, you know what? I think it's time for me to maybe stop touring, because touring in the Springfield was rough. Touring in Poco was rough. I always loved engineering, and that's what I did, and I loved producing records, and I was freshly married, and I thought, you know what? Why not stay home with my wife? The studio is literally half a mile from my house.
Oh, that's nice.
And downhill I could take and coast without burning any gas to get to work.
And just when you thought everything was going to be all peaceful and quiet, a guy named Kenny Loggins comes into your life.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was that was on my Poco trip that all happened.
But that ended up being a good relationship that you had with Kenny, wasn't it?
Say it again?
That was a good relationship that you ended up having with Kenny Loggins, wasn't it?
Yes, yes. I mean, Kenny was a good partner. He worked really hard. We were, see, how do I say this? He was somebody who really wanted to be successful. He was able to love to write different styles of music. I could see right away that he was, as a singer, he was diverse. His music was diverse. Even though he was not a success and just simply a songwriter, I could see where we would never get caught, or I would never get caught as a producer working with him, where your record's too country for rock, or your rock is too country for whatever format. And since he loved diversification, the idea in making his first record was to include some country music, to include some folk, to include some rock, to include some light jazz, show him off as more of a blue-eyed soul singer as well as a folk singer, allowing an audience to make a choice, have a choice when it came to the music.
And you basically had to groom him, correct? You had to give him a manager. You had to give him even a guitar.
Well, yes, he didn't have anything at that point in time. He didn't even own a guitar, really. So the whole process started out with me loaning him some of my gear from Springfield. I had to find his band, put his band together. I started out with Merle Bergani and Larry Sims because they had been in a group called the Sunshine Company, who had opened up for Poco, and I had made friends with them. So I called them thinking that they might be good for Kenny because their music was a little bit more, in the Sunshine Company, it was a little bit more lighter, and Larry Sims had an incredibly beautiful voice, which I think would work great with Kenny. The sax player lived underneath my house with my former wife. We had I think it was a 2-story house, and the bottom floor had 2 different apartments set up, and we lived in the top. And Al was a computer programmer who had moved from Northern California, whose hobby was playing saxophone and viola. He was really a saxophone player, couldn't get a job, and eventually, decided he better stick with computers. But I thought he was a great player. He is a great player, and I saw his talent, and I asked him if he'd consider auditioning for Kenny's band, which he did. John Clark was somebody we just put out feelers for. He was a young guy. He was 19 when he started working with us. And then Michael Lamarty, and the keyboard player, was a friend of Kenny's. They had done some demos together and recordings together, and I thought he was a great choice to bring in as a keyboard player. And he made the first album with us, but then he didn't want to go out on the road. But Kenny needed, in order to be a success, he needed, the right manager, right? The right agency. He needed an attorney. He needed business management. So, in the process of helping him to get that information, the record was about ready to come out. And so it just wasn't, he wasn't ready. I mean, he wasn't ready to lead a band. He'd never led a band. How do you expect someone to pilot a boat if you've never, been at the helm before, which is really the metaphor. So I went to Clive Davis and I said to him, we've got a record here. I would like you to take a listen to it. And he listened to it and he says, I really love this. He says, but I see a problem. I said, what's that? And he says, you're all over the record. I said, I am all over the record. And I said, he said, I thought you didn't want to tour anymore. I said, don't. He said, but I want this guy to be a success. And he's just too green to get out here and do it. I think it's, what he really needs is some support that I think I can give him on this first record. And he says, well, what are you talking about? I said, I'm talking about, let's make this a Kenny Loggins album with Jim Messina sitting in. Kind of like the old jazz albums and stuff. And he says, I don't want to do that. And I said, why? And he said, because I would be investing in something that's going to break up after the first record. And I said, well, I don't see it that way. I said, I see it like Leon Russell and Joe Cocker, or Leon Russell and Bonnie and Delaney, or Stan Getz and Charlie Bird. I said, there's been a lot of albums that have been released with artists sharing and sitting in with one another, whereby it doesn't look like a failure. And I said, in this case, what we're doing is that I'm going out on the road. I'm helping him with his interviews. I'm helping him lead his band, helping him gain credibility. In the meantime, while he still needs to get, management, he still needs to get agents, he's got an attorney, he needs business management. And I said, some of this stuff he has to make the decision on his own, but at least I can help him with recommendations and interviews and get him so we can get up to speed to promote this record. And I said, once this album is done and released, I'll tour with him for the first tour. We'll do interviews together. We'll talk about him. I can introduce him to my audiences, being, Poco and Springfield, which I've earned. I should be able to utilize that. And eventually, he said, okay. He said, I'll give it a shot. As much as I don't like the idea, I'll give it a shot. So we went out there, and it was exactly as I hoped it would be. Kenny got a chance to have somebody there to help him through the process. I explained to him we need to do interviews. We need to keep consistent. We can't be talking about something different every night. I encouraged him not to talk about drugs or politics or religion. Just, do what we do best and stay out of that territory, and let them know where we're going and what we're doing and what you're doing in this particular case, so that by the end of the tour, we've gotten through the country and everybody has the same message, and that message is what we want them to hear. And eventually that's what happened, and we ended up selling, 150,000 records, I think, in a very short time, and the music was staying on the charts for a long time. And that's when Clive came to me and said, I know in the beginning I was reluctant for this, but he says, I think that I'd like to recommend that you consider staying in this band, make it a Messina and Loggins, band, and you and Kenny should do that. He says, this only happens, really, most people, once in a lifetime. He says, this is a great opportunity for both of you, and I'd like you to consider it. So I talked to Kenny, and he said, yeah. He says, everything's working, let's do that. So I went back to Clive, and I said, I'd like to call it Loggins and Messina instead of Messina and Loggins, because, to be honest with you, I don't like being on the road. And at some point in time, I'm not going to want to do this, and I'd much rather we promote what we had intended to do, which was Kenny Loggins.
And since I was
Continue to
supposed to
support
be,
that concept.
and since I was supposed to be,
And in retrospect, I was probably stupid, but it is what it is, and we made Kenny a success by virtue of what we could do as executives and producers. He did the other part, but being a great artist and a great singer.
and you,
So
you wanted
all's
to
well that ends well, right?
yeah, and you wanted to be temporary. But how many albums did you do? As long as
Oh, I think I did 7 or 8, and eventually, I don't know how many was released in terms of,
That's a whole new definition of temporary, though.
Every
Yeah,
time
and
try
you know
to
what?
get
The
out.
good news is I was able to get at least 2 a year, or at least at least 2 every 18 months, which is really important for an artist. If you wait too long before you release a second album, time can pass you by, and the consistency is what's important, and most importantly, management who can guide you. Now, we had really good managers, but, and I say but, not to disqualify the first part of my statement, and sometimes people get a tendency to like success so much and the money coming in, they forget that we're just human beings, and you need to learn how to pace yourselves so that people have time at home and to relax and not stress. Stress is something we didn't really know much about in the 60s and 70s until it was a little too late.
So speaking
But,
of pace, it seems like you finally got a little chance to breathe and be on your own for a little bit. What are you doing right now? Now that you're not touring, that you have a little bit of time to yourself, what's in the works right now? What are you actually up to?
Well, right now, I moved to Tennessee a couple of years ago, and because of the move and because of my touring schedule, I have had very little time to do what I needed to do, which was to get my studio up and built, get my wood shop back in place, get my metal shop back in place. So what I've been doing is finishing up construction work here in my studio. The problem is can't really hire anybody because nobody's working, so I've had to strap on my own tool belt, do my own drywall, my own plumbing, my own electrical, the installation of my tools. I've had to go down and, since I've been in Tennessee, I didn't realize the humidity could affect my table saws and my band saws. I've actually had to go out and take a wire brush with on a grinder and peel off all the rust and use sulfuric acid to clean it, and then eventually I installed an April Air dehumidifier, which is a commercial unit, and installed in there. And now my humidity, I can get it down to 50 to 45 degrees, so the rust is not going to form.
No.
But I've been building in the studio. I'm getting ready to put in a raised floor for the control room. But I had one area that was still concrete walls and flooring, so I had to clean all of that out. Apparently, it had flooded at one point in time. So get the rest of the dirt and mud out. It's been quite a job straightening out the electrical. He had the hot and the neutrals reversed, and going through all of that. The phone system was abandoned. I couldn't get anybody from the phone company out here because they don't want to work on personal lines anymore unless you got commercial. So I had to pick up the book, read the manuals, rewire the phone system so that it would work.
Well, let me ask you something.
I've been busy, but I've been busy doing stuff that I don't have a professional card in hand. But I love doing woodworking. I love doing metal work, and thank God for YouTube, because things that I don't understand, I'll get enough of them and finally find the average way of doing it right, and then get in there and do it.
Now let me ask you something, Jim. Now you got all this time to yourself when you're out there drilling, knocking down walls and stuff. If you look back at your career, is there one regret that you might have of something you didn't do or didn't accomplish? Jim?
No, I don't. I do know that no good deed goes unpunished. And I do know that many of the people that I've helped to make successful have not maintained personal relationships. But I used to think that was personal, and I kind of realized that we're such different people, even though we may harmonize together or play together or fit together musically, doesn't always mean that on a personal level that's the case. And as I look back, I can see why there weren't the personal relationships that I hoped would happen, because we're just such different people. And since that realization, I've learned to not take it personal and just realize that it's how it is. You know, not all the people that we choose to work with will also be personal friends, and that's okay.
That is.
My only regret is that we, as a family of musicians and performers, that we were unable to maintain those personal relationships. But I think that's just a product of how it all works. I'm sure many of the actors who do great movies together very seldom get together as a team of friends. I mean, they might get together as a company and say, hey, look what we did, but that's not something you're going to do every night.
Right. Jim, we cannot thank you enough for the time. We know that you got tons of stuff happening.
Got to build another wall and raise that floor.
Yeah, I got to get into the plumbing. I'm not looking forward to that.
But I tell you, if you're ever in Little Rock, you need to call us, and we'll take you out for some of the best barbecue. You're paying for it, but we'll take you out for the best barbecue.
I loved the time when I was in Little Rock. I was trying to remember. I did a Miss America, was it, with a woman who was a winner there. Her name was Terry. I can't remember what it was. Anyway,
now, Jim.
I came there to visit her and her parents, and her mom made some of the best green beans with almonds and I don't know what. Sure. It was the best. It was the best Southern meal I'd had in years. So I will take you up on that.
That sounds good.
Anytime there, Jim, and we really appreciate it. I mean, you're a living legend. I mean, there's no really any way else to say it. But it's been a real pleasure, and we look forward to feeding you some damn barbecue when you get down here. And you don't hammer in your fingers or don't hurt yourself.
Yeah, I keep all my extrusions pulled back and away from those hard spots.
Perfect. Take care of yourself. Hopefully all this virus stuff clears up soon and get out and about again. But we hopefully will talk to you in the near future. And again, Jim, thanks for the time. We really appreciate it.
We appreciate it too. At least I do. Thank you so much. You guys have a great day. Stay safe.
Thanks.
Okay, take care, Jim. Jim Messina.
There you
go. My gosh, that was a long one. I had notes down here. Without me even going to that, he went step by step by step.
Because he's been asked this so many times.
Is that amazing? I mean, it's like a History Channel we was on there for a minute.
And what's crazy is he remembers it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you asked me what I did 40 years ago, I'd be like, I don't remember what I did for lunch.
I mean, Neil Young?
Young?
That's a different one. Not Neil Young.
Is he Japanese?
That's the Oriental version. But Neil Young, Crosby. Oh, my gosh. We went on to Crosby, Still, Nash, and Young. I mean, that was a huge band.
Jody Mitchell. I mean, my gosh.
Then, of course, Kenny Loggins, he had to actually groom him. Kenny Loggins didn't know anything. All he was a songwriter before.
I'd like to have been a fly on that wall, though, because it wasn't all nicey nice. Like, stand back, Kenny, you don't know shit.
He asked Kenny, he said, when you come in, bring me your tape of your music. And when Kenny got there, they was going to have dinner. He goes, hey, you wrote the tape? No, I didn't. I don't know where it's at. Well, you got a guitar? No, I don't have that either. And then they sat down and he actually sang Danny's song, which is one of my favorites, and I went from there, man. I mean, they were huge. They were Grammy nominees for Your Mama Don't Dance and Your Daddy Don't Rock and Roll. That was one of my favorites.
And Jim's singing a lot on that.
Yeah, a lot of times people think Kenny Loggins is singing the most of it, but it's not. Most of it is Jimmy Messina.
Yeah, I mean, because he went on so long, we didn't even get into where he keeps his awards and all that kind of
Yeah, because
stuff.
I started blacking out there. It was going too long. I said, man, I'm losing consciousness.
I was like, what's happening? But no, fantastic. Jim, if you ever see this, thanks for the time, but amazing. So
Anyway, that's it for now. Stay tuned. We got some more interviews coming up. Maybe Ann Wilson from Heart might be our next interview. And that should be awesome. And ask her how she ate her way out of popular music. But anyway, this is WWW with ArkansasShowcaseRadio.com. And stay tuned, and we'll be coming back to you shortly.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.